Ciao, jewelry makers. I'm Joey Balistreri, and today I am working on another style of minimalist jewelry. I did a little try on for you all maybe a week ago, and I can link that video below so that you can see what these look like on, because they look a little bit odd laying on my beading mat. But I started thinking about ear cuffs. I love minimalist jewelry, and ear cuffs are really on trend again. I had an 14 karat gold ear cuff that I wore daily in the 80s. And then I don't even remember when, maybe about 10 years ago, I bought these Kendra Scott ear cuffs, and they are really beautiful. They have little crystals in them, and the classic Kendra Scott pattern in the in the design of the ear cuff. They are a little bit heavy though, and I like things that are really comfortable and lightweight. So I was just looking at some of my ear cuffs from years ago. I even have a little fashion one that's a bow, and decided to play with that and come up with something on my own that is really lightweight. So there are several designs here. This is the one that I really like. It has no beads. It's really, really simple, and it's just a tiny little spiral, and I left mine plain, but you could add a jump ring through the larger spiral or the smaller one and hang a pearl or a crystal, or you could cut away one of the spirals. There's, once you have the ear cuff made, you can just have a lot of fun with the design and just make each one different. But then I also made these, and I think these are so cute. These fit over the top of the ear. And again, I tried it on, so I can link that video so you can see what they actually look like on the ear. But I just embellished the top of the wire with a glass pearl and some little crystal cubes. And I used really, really fine gauge wire to act as the bead stoppers, which that's the trickiest part of this, really, is just getting that wire nice and tight to hold this in place. And I did hammer my loops on the back just because I like the look of it. But I've done on this one, I mixed my metals. I did a 20 gauge gold round medium temper German style wire, the one that I always use. And then I used a really fine gauge. It is this soft flex non-tarnished copper. Let me try that again. Non-tarnished copper wire in the 26 gauge to create my little spirals that are the bead stoppers here. And I just love the mix of metals, especially the copper has a little bit of a pink look to my eye. And I thought it was pretty with the pink pearl. So on that one, I did that. And then I switched to a 20 gauge copper wire. Can't pick it up. Copper is 20 gauge copper wire and a little check glass bead that has an AB finish on it, my hand behind it, and some little rondelle crystals that are half opaque and half shimmer. They're really small. It's hard to see. And I reversed it. I did the fine gauge gold wire to act as my bead stopper on this one. And this one has a little bit smaller spirals that go behind the ear. So this part is really forgiving because it is totally behind the ear. You never see it unless you're holding it in your hand. So you can hammer them. You can sort of do what you want back here because it really doesn't show. But I like to finish things off as nicely as I can because it looks more professional. So then there was this type, which I also tried on for you in that video. And I know it looks really odd. It actually does sort of have the shape of an ear, but this wire goes behind the ear. And then here's where you can play with the spirals and what you add to dangle. Like this one is quite long, and I did a little glass pearl and a spiral at the end. I sort of created a set, but with these two. I know it's hard to see both of them in the camera, but I sort of created a set with these two. And so I don't know if you can hear my neighbor's dog. He is a really big dog and he's really loud. I don't know what's making him bark. But then I did another one of these that goes behind the ear and did a little bit thicker, more prominent beaded chain, and also a little spiral at the end. So this is where you can embellish with anything you want. A single drop that would come just from behind your earlobe, and you can still wear a stud or a hoop when you wear any of these. So that's the nice thing. And it's no piercing, so it's not permanent. You can enjoy it, have fun if that's your mood for the day. And when you're sort of done with it for a bit, take it off, put it in the drawer, and no piercing, no commitment, but really fun and really fun to make. Like, they come together very quickly. So what I have here is a little dish where I pulled out some little jump rings in case I need them. And I just have some crystals, some tiny little cubes. They're probably a millimeter, and a little 2 millimeter pearl and some little AB check glass beads. And so I'm going to do a truly minimalist design for the ones that I'm going to share with you today. But again, you could do anything. You can add in charms. Like, you can, once you have this basic design, you can do anything you want. So let me set the little sample dishes aside and set these crazy little ears aside, and we will get started together. I was going to leave one here just so that we can look at it. Now, also, I don't know if you noticed, but these really need to be left and right. So you have to decide which ear you want to make it for. And so I did, this one is for my left ear. This one is for the left. And so I tend to do a left ear design because I often wear an earbud and I keep it in my right ear. So I don't want to have an extra thing interfering with my ear. So I also have this little tool, it's really made for, it's a mandrel for making different size jump rings, but I use this, but the handle of this is very similar to the size, and even this part is very similar to the size of a Sharpie marker. So if you don't have this tool, you can still very easily make these. And this is really the one that I use this tool for, is just this simple small one. But a pen works. Like, you can look around, anything with a nice round shape that you can form and put a little pressure on will work. So I do have that tool. And the rest is pretty basic, our jewelry tools. So as much as I measure with my heart, I do have my ruler out here, because I have found that on these, pretty much the bars and the little small ear cuff, pretty much I needed to start with between 5 and 6 inches of wire. It just depends on how much space you want to turn your spirals at the end. So let's start with a little bar ear cuff. We'll start with one of those, and I am going to do this one with a little length of 20 gauge gold wire. And let me see, I already cut it, and it's about 5.5 inches, which is pretty much what I've been working with. And I just want to get my nylon jaw pliers, they're off to the side, and just straighten it a little bit. It's a little bit easier when you start with a nice straight piece of wire, and I'm going to get it warm. And for this little ear bar, I'm going to call it an ear bar. For this little ear bar, I am going to simply use my round nose pliers. I'm going to use this Beadsmith 24 gauge gold wire. It's tarnish resistant, and I really like it. So I'm just going to cut off a length of this, and that's going to be my wrapping wire. And I have just found that this is the trickiest part of this, and you don't even really have to start right in the middle, because when you start creating your stopper with this, it's going to slide around a little bit until you get it secured. So honestly, I've found that of this whole little project, getting this wire wrapped around was the trickiest part. But once you get it going, it's not so bad. So that's all I did, is just get that wire around there and then tidy up those coils. It's very fine gauge wire, so once you have it started, it cooperates easily to tighten up coils and that sort of thing. And so here you just want to pay attention to how many coils you've done, because it's nice to copy. Let me show you this one more time. It's nice to have the same amount of coils on the other side of your design. I mean, you don't have to, but I think it looks nice. So I'm just going to help myself here by holding on to the coils that I've already made. And this just gives me a little bit of leverage to pull really, really tight. And so I'm just going to get that as tight. I'm making a stopper for the beads, but also it's a really beautiful decorative element. Let's see how it's looking. That looks like a nice wide. I'm just going to tighten those coils. That looks really good. And then let me get my nice sharp cutter that I use for smaller wire projects and trim away that excess. We'll need that piece of wire for the other side. And now I'm just going to take my pliers, let me find the end, and just sort of chase that wire around the core wire. I just want to make sure that it's nice and tight. And as always with any jewelry that we make, that nothing is sharp, but this rests right on the ears. So I don't know if you can see, like the tail is truly tiny. So what I do is just sort of, the best description that I can give is get my pliers in there and just kind of open and close as I move around the core wire. And that creates a nice, it's work hardening, but it also tightens that wire right down. And so it feels nice and smooth. I'm just checking it with my hands. It feels nice and smooth, and I have a pretty little coil bead stopper. So now I'm just going to string on this little pattern of beads. And I did a truly minimalist pattern here because that's what I wanted. And I did these like pearl, and these beads remind me of the like a winter ice, but I just think that's really pretty, really simple and basic. But here again on this, if you wanted to hang a really small charm from this and have a little dangle in your ear, the options, once you have this technique, the options are just endless. And so now this side is a little bit trickier because now we have to manage these beads and tighten up our coils, but we're going to just repeat that same exact thing. And as you can see, I've given myself a lot more of that fine wire, this 24 gauge, than I will need for sure. But that little bit of extra that I'm wasting is not wasted to me, because if this process is easier and not frustrating, then I'm okay with it. I'm okay with wasting a little scrap of wire in order to get in there and do what I need to do. So like I said, it's a little tricky to get this started. And you can even do as I'm doing and start away from your bead focal and get a few wraps done. And, you know, you just have to be patient and work your way down, because we do need this to be tight and we want it to be nice and neat. Although honestly, as I actually spoke those words, if you wanted to do a messy wrap here and you like that look of the wire not being so controlled and not being in a perfect coil, that would look nice too. I mean, it's just, once you have the basic technique for these little ear bar cuffs, you can change it up, modify it, make it your own. So I have a good start, and I'm just going to go ahead and slide that down. And what I did on my other ones that helped is, once I had a few coils going, go ahead and get rid of this wire before I do the tightening. The wire that I'm cutting away, the tail that's close to my bead focal point. And then it helps me to go ahead and get that, go ahead and chase that around like I did and tighten up those coils and move it down to the beads. And then let me switch pliers. Let me do my bent chain nose pliers in that direction and get a really good firm grip on it. And then I can take my pliers on this side. That gives me some leverage, and just do a really, really nice, tight wrap. Makes it a little bit easier. Let's see how we're looking. I'm going to count those wires. I think I'm going to just do one more wrap. I'm not going to count them. It looks about right to me. Beautiful. Now I can trim away that little tail, and our focal is pretty much done. I don't know if you can see, I still have to chase that little end around the core and just make sure that it's nice and tight. That is lovely. Use the 3 as my mark, and I'm going to, let me just check my measurement again. I got these pretty right. You can measure these on your own ear, but let me just show you the measurement. I'll pull this up so you can see. They finish out to be about 2 inches long, and that fit really well on my ear. So I will say, like this one, you can see, is a little bit shorter. So what happens when you wear these, the shorter one will stay closer to the top of the ear. And if you make it a little bit longer, you can place it at an angle and it can go down a little bit lower on the ear. They're both really comfortable. So it's quite forgiving. This measurement is quite forgiving. I've worn both of these and they're really comfortable. They just land in a slightly different place. So this, my focal point on the one I'm working on is a little bit longer than the other two. So maybe I'll go for the 2-inch mark. So I'm just going to right about there. Right about there. I'm going to go down on my plier at the fat part, right about at that 2-inch mark, and just fold that over so it looks something like that. And then I'm going to do that again. Go right again at about that 2-inch mark and go down and fold that one over. So it looks something like that. Looks pretty good. Okay, and now you can trim these if you want a smaller spiral. I think I'm going to leave mine and just create my spiral. And again, this goes behind the ear, so if you want to do an open spiral, you can. If you wanted just to do one tiny little loop and be done with it that way, that works as well. It's really just to not have a blunt cut wire end. But I tend to like to go ahead and hammer my spirals and twist them so that they go down behind the ear. Beautiful. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Get my plier in there. I can get in between my other wire. Like I said, you could have cut those shorter, and then it wouldn't be in your way for this part, but I'm leaving it. It's going behind the ear, and I quite like my spirals. So I'm going to do one more here. That opening space really doesn't matter because, again, it's behind the ear. Now, the reason I did my spirals flat like this is because I want to hammer them a little bit before I bend them down. So let me pause the video and do that, and I'll come back. Okay, so if you can see, I hammered both sides of my little ear bar, and now I am just going to take my pliers and just bend them down so they're not poking out when this is on the ear. And that little ear cuff is done. You can straighten it up with your hands. They are a little bit delicate, but then again, it's not the kind of thing that gets a lot of abuse because you just place it on your ear, and that one is completely finished. I think it's such a sweet, fun idea. And I know it doesn't look like a whole lot here in my hand and on my mat, but I will get some pictures of this at the end of the video so you can see what it looks like on. And you can also go back and look at the video where I tried these on. So let's move on to this one. This is a really fun one. As I said, it kind of looks like an ear. And once you make your shape and it fits your ear, you can do whatever you want. You can make a tiny little spiral. You can make one little loop and hang something so that this is at the top of the ear and you can have something hanging here as well as at the bottom. I quite like just a spiral at the top of my ear. And on this one, I'm going to do a really short, I have a little scrap of chain, and I'm going to do a really short little dangle that will come behind my diamond stud or my pearl stud with just these little crystals. So this one's going to be even more minimalist. So, and I'm going to do this one in copper so that I also have a set with this one. And I'm going to do it for my left ear. So this is going to be the direction, if you can tell. So for the left ear, it has to go this way. And then I did this one for the right ear. And so I'm going to do left ear because, as I said, I wear an earbud quite often, pretty much daily in my right ear. So in case I want to wear that. So again, I think I started with this one. I gave myself a little bit more, about 8 inches of wire. But as you can tell from my sample, you will definitely not need 8 inches of wire. But I don't like to short myself so that when I get to making my spirals, I have plenty of options with design there. So I'm just going to get a nice curve to this, almost like an ear, and warm it a little bit. And I'm going to do that same thing at the top. And I don't need to measure yet because I'm just going to do that same thing on the fat part of my pliers. Just bring that down. So, and I squared one off. I did one a little bit more of a point. I mean, it's going to rest. It's a very small spot on an ear, so it's going to rest nicely. And then with this part here, I'm just going to go ahead and do a spiral. And the top is pretty much going to be done. Now, what I did on my other one is once I had the spiral made, I went to the mirror, kind of like we do when we're making a necklace, and I just put it on my ear and made sure that it was laying where I wanted. So if you can see on the sample, I had to just do a little odd bend so that it would lay flat on my ear. And, you know, it was very easy little adjustment that has to be made once the spiral is done. So I'm just going to curl this. Let's see, right about there. And I'm pretty sure it's going to have to go out and up a little bit like my other one. But I can wait until I try it on after I'm finished with the bottom and make that little adjustment. So I will probably want to hammer this one too. I just really like the look of the hammering on the spirals. And since I already came up with these measurements, I'm going to use my sample as a measuring tool, if you will. Just using my fingers, getting that wire warm and getting it into the shape of an ear. And this part again is the part that goes behind the ear that is really not seen. It's nice to have it smooth and, you know, in good condition and not twisted and marred, but it's not super important because you never see it. Okay, and then I just want to make a little, bend right about there. And that's the part that goes right under the earlobe. So we don't want it to be too tight. So just a little, get this wire on this side, on the front side. And then I definitely need to trim this away because I don't want a large spiral at the bottom of this ear cuff because I'm going to create a dangle for this part. So I want this spiral to have an open. I want it to have a little bit of an opening. I can spiral it, but I want it to have a little bit of an open center like that so that I have a place to add my chain. It's going to be a chain with a little crystal drop. I'm going to leave it just a little bit open. Okay, and I do not want this to be very long either. As I said, my first sample was quite minimalist. It was minimalist, but it had a long sort of little bit of a drama with the chain I did there. But I am going to make this one much shorter, like maybe only a few links. So let me come in and take a little bit of that chain. It is so tiny. And I'm going to use this little scrap of wire that I had and make my own head pin. Put another little spiral, just like I did here, this tiny little spiral and hammered it. I'm going to do that same thing, but I want my Xuron pliers when I want to make a teeny tiny spiral. I love these pliers for that. They have the tiniest little tip. So I'm using the scrap of that same wire that I used to wrap the bead stopper on the bracelet bar. That little piece of wire that was left over is going to make a perfect little head pin for this one. That looks good. Get this nice and smooth. Also want to, since it's a head pin, I want to put a little bend, make that wire, see what I did? Make that wire go, twisted, and turn it again. Make that wire go straight up, just like a head pin. And now I'm just going to pause the camera so I'm not hammering in your ear, just a couple of hits on I keep my bench block right beside me, but I don't want to hammer in your ear. So let me pause and do a couple of little pounds on this and then we'll finish it. Okay, as you can see, my little hammering is done. And now these little beads that I chose for this pattern, these are the tiniest little cube beads, but they add just a little bit of sparkle because they just have like a little crystal look to them. They are so tiny. They're almost the size of an 11OC bead, but it's a cube. So that's that simple pattern. And I'm going to wrap this right onto that little tiny length of chain. So let me get a hold of it with my tiny Xuron pliers and do a tiny little wrapped loop. As I said, really small and really a minimalist piece of jewelry. Let me open that and add it right to this little piece of gold chain. I don't even need my pliers because this wire is really soft and fine. So I think I can get my wraps in that space fairly easily. Straighten that a little bit, my other pliers. Okay. Okay. now I have made these tiny little jump rings, and that is what I'm going to use to attach the chain to the bottom of this. Move some things off the work surface here. That is what I'm going to use to attach the chain to the bottom of this ear cuff. And there again, I mixed the gold and copper. So it's going to be like a little set of ear cuffs. And so that part will just hang right behind my ear. And then here where my earlobe is, I can still wear a stud or a pearl, you know, a little diamond, or even a hoop would be pretty. So I will have to go to the mirror and try this on. And on my other ones, I had to make like a little, whatever little bend was needed so that it lays flat on my ear. But that's the basic technique. And I'll get some pictures up at the end of the video so you can see how it turned out. And then our very last ear cuff is going to be this quite simple one with no beads, although you could add beads, but it's going to be a really, truly simple one to make. And I think, let's see, I have a piece of copper wire here, the 20 gauge copper wire, because I do not have a copper one made like that. So this is, again, I think you need between 5 and 5.5 inches. I've ended up with a lot more than I need here, but that's okay. I'll either trim it away or I'll have a little bit larger spiral. So I have it nice and smooth and pretty straight. And so just a couple of inches from the end of my wire, I'm just going to make a bend in it. And this little space here can be as close. If you want to make it closer, you can. I think I will. Because I'll show you mine. I had set it aside. Mine is so, my ear, I needed a really small, I'll show you on this jump ring mandrel. I needed a really small round for that to fit my ear and not be pinching, but be snug. I was on just this third section down on this mandrel. So I want to make this kind of tight so that it shows. And then I'm going to just guesstimate right about there and do the same thing. Pull this around. And there again, if you want to tighten that up, that little space, you can. Bring those together. And now I'm going to bring in my little mandrel and just wrap this around. Okay. And now with these, actually, let me put it back on the mandrel just to hold on to it. Now with these, this opening is the back of the ear cuff. So these, where I'm going to do my spirals, I can bend it out of the way. And on this other one, you can either cut this one off or make a second little spiral. I'm not sure what I want to do with it yet. Maybe I will bend it upwards and see if I like it as another spiral. I know it looks a little bit like a strange animal at this point, but I'm also going to definitely cut away some of this because that would be a huge spiral. And then you can do your spirals really tight or open. Since my ear cuff, this is a very small piece, I'm going to do a little bit of a tighter spiral, not such an open one. Just wind it all the way down. A little bit more. Okay. And then this one, let's see. I want to bring it up that way. That's going to be the front of the ear, so maybe just turn it a little bit. And let's do a spiral on this one too and see where it takes us. Let's see what direction. If that's the front, I'll go this way. As you can tell, I'm not very precise with when I make these. I let it be organic, and really no two are alike. I know some people have like this perfect template and measurement, and they can sit and do 100 and they're all exactly alike. That is not me. I really don't do anything in jewelry that way. I tend to make a thing and then I move on to something else. So I don't like to mass produce anything. So this is the kind of a project that I would just really have fun with. Let's see. I think I just turned it the wrong way. Let's see what I did on this one. And make this one facing forward. And then from here, if you want to open this out so that you have a wider cage, you can, or you can pinch it closed so that it's smaller. And I'm going to put this back on my mandrel. Get my spirals down there, harden it. And then what I did on my other one is took my pliers and just turned that in a little bit. You can see, just turned it in just a little bit so it's nice and straight behind the ear. Just a tiny little, just to round it out a little bit more. Let me smooth that one out a little tiny bit. And then what I always do is go put it on the edge of my ear and then see what adjustments I need to make. This one looks like it might be pretty cute. So at the end of the video, I will put up some pictures because, as I said, I know that ear cuffs don't look like much when they are laying on the mat, but this one I'm really excited about wearing. And this was a longer one. And there again, you can see I did left and right ear, and here's all the little bars. And if you guys want to make something else that's minimalist and really chic and different, I have one of my very first videos that I did was on these hand chains. And this is done with microfaceted garnets and gold-filled stardust beads and this E-coated chain that I found at a bead show. And it's just a simple, really tiny minimalist bar. And it is so comfortable. I forget that I have it on, and it acts as your ring and your bracelet, but you can also wear a ring right along with it. And you can wear this chain on your, really any of your fingers. I like the middle finger, but you can do it on your pointer too. And then your beautiful microfaceted gemstone beads or whatever you've chosen here, flat coin beads look really great. They just rest on the back of your hand and they're really easy to put on, really easy to make, a really fun project. So if you haven't watched that video, it's interesting. And, this is from the Roaring 20s. There may be, I don't know all the history of hand chains, but if you ever look at the Flapper Girls or any movies that are set in the Roaring 20s, they did elaborate hand chains with pearls and diamonds and like a cuff here and then a chain that went to a finger. They're quite lovely, but I sort of recreated the design in a really minimalist, very very petite, unobtrusive way. And it's a really fun video. So I'll link that one below if you were noticing my hand chain and you were curious. So thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you all in the next video. Ciao, jewelry makers.